World.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to AM Live, and this morning we're looking at indecent exposure. As is our custom on Tuesdays, we have an all-female panel, and this morning we'll be looking at the weaponization of acts of intimacy online. And I'll introduce you to my panelists soon enough, but first let's take a look at the top stories. And the death toll in the Shakahola killing has risen to 73 after 26 bodies were exhumed on Monday. President William Ruto has ordered for investigations into the matter, stating that people like controversial preacher Paul Mackenzie should be incarcerated. Kevin Mutai also reports that the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji, has revealed that several charges, including terrorism, will be preferred against the suspected cult leaders. With more, as I mentioned, is Kevin Mutai.
The exhumation of bodies in Shakahola, Kilifi County continues to shock the country, with body after body being recovered from the mass grave site. 26 bodies were exhumed Monday, with 7 bodies recovered from a single grave, a sign that the numbers of the dead could rise in the coming days.
People like Mackenzie and all other terrorists and criminals do not belong to any religion. They belong to jail.
The Inspector General of Police who visited the crime scene noted that investigators are also closing in on other religious leaders linked to the Shakahola massacre. Kome said the authorities started developing interest in Mackenzie since 2017 and have been on his trail until the death of 2 children allegedly forced into fasting till death, which uncovered the crimes in Shakahola. But the Speaker of the Senate and former Kilifi Governor Amason Kingi, while condemning the act, faulted the National Intelligence Service for failing to detect the religious cult and tame the perpetrators before the mass killings occurred.
And we arrested him, not once, on a number of occasions, and you have presented it before the courts of law. Then DPP will argue the matter before court. Then a decision is made by the court of law.
Police have also disputed claims that Mackenzie owns the 800-acre piece of land. The DPP Nuruddin Haji calling for a sober approach in the investigations to ensure severe punishment is meted out on those behind the deadly doctrine.
We will probably consider even charging the individual on crimes to do with terrorism, such as radicalization. And one reason is we're going to do that is because it will give us a chance to have these individuals in custody for as long as we can, to be able to finish the investigations here.
A total of 29 people have so far been rescued, among them this man from Nyamira County who was accosted by the police as he tried to run into the forest.
Nikisha kutafuta bwanangu alikuchapa mwezi wa 10 tarehe 12. Akaniambia ameenda Jerusalem kwa Mackenzie kutafuta Yesu. Changwani.
Hakuwa anataka kuokolewa, manaka anataka kuona Yesu. Hivyo ndio anatuambia. Hata nimemuuliza mama na sister yangu, anajua penye yako na ako karibu kufa. Kumaanisha nafaa okolewe mapema kabla afe.
Be careful with these religious beliefs. Extremism, radicalization will not be allowed. Because that is what happened here. People are radicalized. I mean, how does somebody tell you not to eat and you don't eat?
The exhumation continues on Tuesday, with Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki expected in Shakahola. Kevin Mutai, NTV in the county of Kilifi.
The Shakahola cult's deaths continue to unravel like a horror movie. Survivors of the sect have narrated horrifying details of how they were introduced into the cult, giving up everything they had to follow Pastor Paul Mackenzie. They say they were promised a good life and persuaded to join the cult to meet their maker, only for many of them to be led to an early grave. NTV's Melita Oletenges with witness accounts on the Shakahola Horror.
As homicide detectives continue to discover graves in the expansive Chakama Ranch and a chilling horror of exhumation, there are some who live to tell the tale of their horrific experiences. 45-year-old Ben Amani from Hola in Tana River County narrates how he was lured to Shakahola in August 2021.
Nenda kule tukakaribishwa na wenye waliokuwa kule mwanzo. Nashukuru tunakaa pamoja nao. Leo mwendo wa saa 7 ndio nilishtukia askari hao, kwa maana nilikuwa nishachoka. Nilitoka nyumbani nikaenda mahali kwa ya mto baridi kidogo kujituliza. Basi nikaona tu ghafla watu wananizingira na kikosi cha serikali.
The details of the radicalization remain scanty, but residents say they were subjected to fasting for days, taking a few days to break the fast, then back to fasting.
Hili jambo la kuomba si kama ati unalazimishwa ufanye. Unaambiwa kwa wakati ulipofika inabidi ujinyime ili mwili upate nguvu ya roho, ili uweze kuyajua yaliyo ndani ya roho. Naona sasa mambo mengi lazima upitie kwa roho akufunulie, si mwanadamu, ni roho mwenyewe. Ndio hiyo sasa tukanaona ninafunga baada ya kama siku 6-7 najifungua mwenyewe. Anza tena maisha vile vile tu.
Maurice Yimbo, a resident of Kanyakwar in Kisumu, says he lost his 3 children to Mackenzie's cult, who disappeared from home 2 years ago.
Mambo ya hawa watoto ilianzia mwaka wa 2020 ilikuwa wakati wa corona na shule zilikuwa zimefungwa. Sasa tulikuwa tuko na watoto nyumbani. Sasa hii kitu ikawa hivi, ndugu yangu ambayo ni last born wetu akaanza mtindo fulani ya kuwa ikifika Jumapili anatoka na kijana yangu first born yangu hii, kwa sababu walikuwa marafiki wanaenda kwa kanisa. Mtoto alikaa kitu kama mwezi 2 akapotea, na kupotea kwenda kuuliza kwa ndugu yangu, nikapata ndugu yangu pia yuko.
After a 1-year silence, the children and their uncle are said to have contacted their mother.
Mama yao akawauliza, mko wapi? Ati tuko Lamu. Unafanya nini Lamu? Ati tuko tu tuna mambo ya kanisa ndio tuko nayo. Mama yao akauliza, uko na kina nani? Wakasema watoto wote wako nayo. Wakasema hata ndugu yangu wako nayo. Sasa ndio nikakimbia tena kwa DCI. Nikawaeleza, wakaanza kutrack. Wakati walianza kutrack from last year mwezi wa 11 wakao hizo simu zinafungwa na zinafunguliwa. Wakapata ati wako Malindi.
Giving up on the tracking efforts by the DCI, Yimbo took matters into his own hands and traveled to Malindi in search of his children, but the worst awaited him.
Walituelezea hawa watoto wetu walishikwa kati ya tarehe 15 walikuwa naepa March. Sasa tarehe 15 hiyo walikuwa naepa, na wakawa wakipata kama wewe unaepa kwa ujeuri ulikuwa unanyongwa watu hapo. Sasa hawa watoto walielezewa hawa watoto walinyongwa tarehe 15 mpaka tarehe 17 March. Tulienda kwa children, hao watoto walikuwa wamejitiniwa, wamewekwa kwa children huko, ndio walikuwa wanatuelezea. Vile nilifika hapo na mimi nikatoa tu picha zangu. Wakaniambia huyu anaitwa rafiki yetu, anaitwa mtu fulani, unaona. Tulishangaa, wakaniambia huyu ameishi, tulikuwa tumeishi nao Tiro. Ni huyu tulikuwa tumeishi naye yuko sehemu inaitwa siji Dodoma huko, tulikuwa tumeishi naye. Hao watu walishauawa na waliuawa tarehe fulani.
As Kenyans from different parts of the country continue to flock the Chakama Ranch in search of their loved ones who have been off-grid following an extremist doctrine. How so many Kenyans would disappear without a trace remains a mystery. Melita Oletenges, NTV.
Azimio la Umoja leadership in Parliament has termed the unfolding horrific deaths in Shakahola as monumental failure by the state, as it called out the National Intelligence Service, NIS, and the judiciary, saying the system failed Kenyans and they deserve to know why. As a result, the opposition is demanding an urgent public inquiry with consequences for those who slept on the job. Duncan Hemba with more.
As the discovery of more shallow graves and exhumation of bodies in the now horror thickets of Shakahola in Kilifi continues, the opposition Azimio wing of Parliament has come out trailing their guns at the country's security apparatus.
This is a colossal failure of the state. It is an unforgivable failure of security intelligence that, in theory, extends from Nairobi all the way to Shakahola and every other village in Kenya, ending with the chiefs, assistant chiefs, village elders, and Nyumba Kumi heads. This system failed, and Kenyans deserve to know why.
The leaders say it is disturbing that so many people could walk away from their homes, stay away for so long, starve and die without anyone noticing or reporting something amiss.
An inquiry into this massacre is a must. We must know who did or should have done what. We must audit the criminal justice system and its interactions with the main suspect and members of this cult. We must audit the members of the national government administration offices and how their inaction could have led to this pain and shame. What happened clearly in Kilifi is callous, painful, and wrong. We believe it could have been prevented.
Kilifi Senator Justice retired Stewart Mazayo and Malindi Member of Parliament Amina Mnyazi have pointed accusing fingers at the security apparatus, putting Inspector General of Police Japhet Koome on the spot.
Na ikiwa huyu pastor anaweza kwenda kama huko na akachukua ekari 800 na akageuza hii ekari 800 ya ardhi kuwa mahali pa kuzika watu ambao wanamwamini yeye akieneza dini ya Mwenyezi Mungu, tunauliza swali, hawa wakuu wa polisi, hawa wanaoangalia mambo ya ujasusi, hawa wanaoangalia mambo ya uchunguzi, hawa watu walikuwa wakiabudu Mungu wapi?
2017 is when police got interested in this person. But I'll let you know, there are many other people we are following up, we are interested in, whom we believe are involved in similar issues.
2019, kama tunakumbuka, aliyekuwa amekalia hiki kiti changu ambaye ni waziri saizi Aisha Juma, aliweza kuteta na huyu mwanamume, kwa sababu huyu mwanamume ama huyu Pastor Ezekiel Mackenzie alikuwa anawaambia watu wachukue certificates zao waende wakazichome. Ilileta utata, na that was the red flag ambapo serikali ilikuwa inafaa ifuatilizie kuanzia pale. Walimwachilia, na kila anaposhikwa akienda kotini anaachiliwa na bondi ya shilingi 10,000 peke yake. Sasa 10,000 yetu leo hii sisi kama Wakenya tunalia kwa sababu tumeweza kupoteza maisha zaidi ya watu 50.
That a criminal with us owns 800 acres here. Well, it's a matter under investigations, because other parties have come forward saying he does not own this parcel of land. So it's a matter again under investigations.
Monumental failure by the state is what the opposition has termed the unfolding horror in Shakahola, Kilifi. They are pointing an accusing finger at the government, specifically the National Intelligence Service and the security apparatus in general. Will heads roll, and what will be the next step for the government? Duncan Haemba, NTV, Nairobi.
The Evangelical Alliance of Kenya now says there is no need for further regulation of the church since the church is already regulated by the existing laws of the land. EAK Chair Nelson Makanda, who will be hosting tomorrow morning, says preachers who are involved in criminal activities should be treated as such and action taken against them. Brian Mushiri has more.
The unearthing of atrocious activities in Shakahola, which has led to the unearthing of more than 65 bodies, have been linked to a deadly cult, with Kenyans now wondering whether there should be strict regulations on churches. Religious organizations are expected to be registered as societies in Kenya. Regulation of churches has been a thorn in the flesh of religion in Kenya, with the first major attempt coming in January 2016, when then Attorney General Githu Muigai attempted to bring sanity to the pulpit. Muigai proposals were that clerics submit a certificate of good conduct and their theological training certificates from an accredited theology institution, that religious organizations submit their constitution showing statement of their doctrine of faith, that any religious society in Kenya must have its constitution with programs, ministries, charitable activities and education activities undertaken by the religious society and details of persons coordinating these activities, and that all religious societies must be registered and open to the registrar's inspection at any time. However, the religious leaders have come out stating that there are already regulations keeping them in check.
What is not there is more enforcement. Enforcement where people do wrong, the penal code should just be applied to them and be punished just like any other citizen and like any other institution.
Currently, the Societies Act, Cap number 108, dictates that every society which is not a registered society or an exempted society is an unlawful society. Any person who, knowing or having reasonable cause to believe a society to be an unlawful society, A, is a member or attends any meeting of that society, or B, allows a meeting of that society or of any members of that society to be held in any house, building or place belonging to or occupied by him or over which he has control, shall be guilty of an offense and be liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year or to a fine not exceeding 5,000 shillings or both such imprisonment and such fine. Last year, at the height of the political campaigns, Ida Odinga came under fire for calling for the regulation of churches in Kenya.
All these people must be trained so that you can get quality. Even if there are many, you get quality of what they're teaching. Some of the churches you go into and you think you are in a mad place. I'm sorry to say that. But let us have quality organization called churches.
Brian Mushiri, NTV, Nairobi.
I wonder what my guests make of those statements by Ida Odinga. She later retracted said statement. I have a story open here. Ida Odinga apologizes for remarks on mushrooming of churches. But is it perhaps time to have this conversation again, to revive it? Let's take a look at the dailies. Actually, I am remiss in not introducing my panelists first, because I have not. And with me in studio, we have Dr. Mary Goretti Akinyi Otieno, and she's a lecturer at Department of Sociology, University of Nairobi. She actually holds 2 PhDs. So should it be doctor in anthropology as well as in sociology? Sociology, correct? Gender studies. All right, happy to have you in studio with us this morning. We also have Lois Snow, psychology specialist. And aside from that, I didn't add a title here, but she's also reverend. Which is apt, because I'm curious what she makes of the events, the horrors of Shakahola. having just walked into studio, but happy to see her this morning, Florence Machio, women's rights campaigner. Perfect timing, Florence. We also have Angela Minayo, who is an advocate and programs officer, KICTANET. I hope I pronounced the acronym right. KICTANET, all right. She'll be telling us a little bit about it and her work, where it's actually you deal with women's programs around in the digital space. Okay, so she'll be giving us a little bit of explanation on what that entails. And this is what we're discussing. I mentioned it right at the start. Indecent exposure, the weaponization of acts of intimacy online. If you've not met before, my name is Olive Burrows and I'll be your host for the duration of the next 1.5 hours or so. Okay, Daily Nation. I've seen a lot of newspapers have now caught up with the Nation Media Group, together with Kevin Mutai, Wainaina, Karim in Mombasa, our coast regional reporters and cameramen, as well as our newspaper team there have been on this story right from day one. The rest are catching up now, but the numbers have jumped to 73. Shakahola Horror deaths jump to 73. Police exhumed another 26 bodies from multiple graves in Pastor Paul Mackenzie's Shakahola village farm in Kilifi yesterday, taking the toll to 65, with 8 other church members who had been rescued succumbing in hospital. But the search for bodies is not over yet. Amid reports, controversial pastor had warned of, quote, consequences. And I think this, you know how they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. The picture on the front page of the Daily Nation, I think, just says it all. I see it's a picture taken by Washira Mwangi of the Nation. Some of the 26 bodies that were exhumed yesterday from multiple graves at Shakahola village in Kilifi County. This brings the total tally of exhumed bodies in the last 4 days to 65. And I see various images, a father's pain. My missing sons among the dead. I see Godwin Maxwell, 17 years of age. Vincent Lihanda, 21 years of age. Collins Lijodi, 14 years of age. I see several quotes here. President William Ruto terming Paul Mackenzie a terrorist. President Ruto likens Mackenzie's activities to those of terrorists who use religion to radicalize. Catholic Church and legislators call for the introduction of laws to curb the emergence of cults. And Kisumu man suspects that his 3 sons who went missing are among the dead. More on pages 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the Daily Nation. And I see they have quoted the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Kome, at the very top there. And it reads, only DNA tests will reveal the identity of victims. Says the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Kome. I see a quote also here on the front page of the Daily Nation. I hope it's close enough for you to see as well. And it says, mnacho pigania nacho hamkijui na kitawaramba. Nimewaambia kitawaramba. You don't know the magnitude, I beg your pardon, of what you are fighting. You will soon face the consequences. So that is the front page of the Daily Nation. Let's see how the other dailies have covered this horror. And we take a look now. Let's take a look at the Standard. And they call it a cult massacre. Questions abound after more than 70 bodies of cult victims were dug up in graves on land said to belong to Pastor Paul Mackenzie. Is there a recruiting agency? Why didn't the intelligence community smell a rat in spite of too many telltale signs? Did local police look the other way as gullible faithful were lured to their deaths? Is it time to regulate religious activities? That appears to be the question this morning. And I see on the front page, President William Ruto is quoted as saying what we're seeing in Shakahola is akin to terrorists. Mackenzie is a terrible terrorist. I have instructed the agencies responsible to get to the bottom of the activities of the people who want to use religion to advance weird and unacceptable ideologies. I see here Kithure Kindiki, the Interior Cabinet Secretary, has also been quoted on the front page of the Standard. The quote being, the horrendous blight on our conscience must lead not only to the most severe punishment of the perpetrator of the atrocity, but tighter regulation of every church, mosque, temple, and synagogue going forward. When we look at the Star, it is the same story as you would expect. And this is their headline: How Mackenzie won hearts of villagers, followers, and residents mingled freely for 3 years. But this changed at the start of 40-day fast. Several images. The man in question, who President William Ruto has labeled a terrorist, controversial Pastor Paul Mackenzie. To the right, we have detectives from the homicide unit and forensic experts retrieve more bodies from Shakahola graves in Magarini, Kilifi yesterday. When we take a look at the Taifa Leo, you would expect same headline. And it reads as such: Shakahola, serikali yazinduka usingizini. And several leaders have been highlighted on the front page there. We have President William Ruto, the governor, Kilifi Governor Gideon Mongaro, Kithure Kindiki, Interior Cabinet Secretary, Moses Wetangula, National Assembly Speaker, Nurdin Haji, Director of Public Prosecutions, and finally the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Koome. Mili 26 zaidi yafukuliwa, huku viongozi wa serikali wakionekana kushtuka na kuahidi kuchukua hatua ya kutanzua kitendawili cha vifo katika dhehebu la Paul Mackenzie japo kwa kuchelewa. And again, we have those bodies there. The image again is by Washira Mwangi. Before we get into what else is contained in the dailies this morning, ladies, I'm curious what you make of these events. I'll start with you, Lois.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that we just need to acknowledge is that issues of personal faith and belief are extremely strong. And it depends, because even right now, the person who is believing differently and maybe soberly has also been guided and maybe mentored by someone almost on a regular basis, which is mostly in faith is a weekly basis. You find people being taught on a weekly basis on the faith and belief systems that they uphold. And so I really acknowledge the fact that this happened over years. It's not a one-week thing. And it started as an innocent way of belief system, and it's only the sudden end of it, when now it changed and it detoured, that things have happened differently. But for the last 3 years, these people have been with their pastor, and they have been doing whatever they have been doing because they have not fasted for 3 years. Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens then? What is it that makes somebody then believe in another person? And that is because he offered an alternative. Because for all these people to have traveled and joined him, there was an alternative to a life that they were living, and they needed maybe better, or they needed something different. And he offered it up to a certain time that things changed. And that's the danger of not being able to monitor what people are going through and their vulnerability to someone else taking advantage of them. And at the core of it, I know, and for sure, when you look at some of these issues that have happened before, because this is not the first time this is happening, it has happened before. And I remember the lawyer's case. You remember there was a teacher's case sometime in Rift Valley. So what we know is that a lot of mental illnesses find very safe havens in religion. So someone is unwell, is mentally unstable, or is going through a situation that can make them really take advantage of another person, but it usually finds a very safe haven in religion. And if not religion, then it sometimes finds a safe haven in the ability maybe to employ people. So when they employ somebody, they put them through certain conditions, and they have no way of getting out because they are getting resources and their livelihood from that.
Okay, and you sort of have preempted one of the questions that I was planning to borrow from the Inspector General of Police. And he asked, how can someone tell you not to eat and you don't eat? And you've talked about some of these people perhaps were suffering from certain conditions that made them susceptible.
Yeah, because, you know, from personal experience in the world of psychology, I think I got this firsthand when I worked at one time at a gender-based violence center. And you find that the person who has been violated is told when they go to hospital because they've broken a limb, then they say, I fell over the staircase. And you find this person is able to say so because there's something that has made them very vulnerable to the person who is now guiding them to say things that are not real for purposes of, you know, continuing to kind of be under that kind of influence. So it's very possible, just like today we go to a doctor and I have an illness, and because I trust that doctor, because he's in that position, and he tells me, take this medication 4 times a day, and I do take, that's the same thing that is happening to issues of faith and issues of indoctrination.
Okay. I'm curious what Dr. Rimeri Goretti has thinks of these events. You know, speaking first as a Kenyan and then also as a sociologist. When you read these headlines, when you hear these horror stories, because that is what they are, what runs through your mind?
It's very unfortunate that the society has come to this, and this is the failure of what we call socialization. How are our children socialized? From the time they are born to the time they are now exposed to the public, and there is more to come. This is just a tip of the iceberg if you don't work at it, because so many things are happening here. Some, we have told, have sold their property to come here. Some have come to seek wellness and all that. And if you look at it, there's a lot. There's a big gap between what we used to have as religion and what we now have as religion. We have not yet struck a balance where we say this is what we want to do and this is what we should do. So the people who have gone ahead of us in the line of religion, they make use of the society. And if we don't check it, we lose a lot, and especially our children. And this calls for the society not to entrust anybody with their child right from the home before they leave home. Because if you look at these people, maybe they never got information before they reached the age of 5, I would say so. So when they stepped out to the nursery, they were exposed to the outside world, and it continued until what it is. So they are not firm in their mind. So it calls for parents to go back to the drawing board and inculcate in children what they would want it to be right from home, such that even if you now go out, you are not shaken. So society has failed, and we have failed. We need to go back and nurture our children the best way we can. Otherwise, we are losing them. You can see even in the last general elections, the millennials never came out to vote. That tells you that something is not adding up. They have not yet, and yet they can consume such kind of things. And again, with the advent of technology, we are losing it even big time. You saw the other day in the TikTok where somebody has posted a room where if you want to go and commit suicide, there is everything for you, waiting for you, whether you want to kill yourself through a gun, through a sharp knife, through electrocution and all that, it is there for you. So we can tell you where the society is heading to, and we shall have such many rooms even here in Nairobi, where we come from and all that. So we need to go back as a people, as human beings, to bring up the humanity the best way it should. This is not, religion is part of us. It is cultural. We were born, we found religion, whether it is Christianity, Islamic and all that, it has been part of us. But how do we consume it? It should be there to help us, but not to destroy us the way it has done this time around. Thank you. Yeah.
How about you, Angela? What are your thoughts on these stories?
First of all, I just want to echo the sentiments of the panelists that this is the worst massacre we've seen in this country. But I want to say that I think the legal system also failed. the police to the courts. I don't understand how a cash bail of 10,000 shillings was granted. I can't wrap my head around it. We've seen Aisha Jumua's call for his arrest in 2018. This is 2023, so for 5 years, still no action was taken. So I'm just thinking, what else don't we know? What else is being swept under the rug? And this is just one isolated case, but I think Kenyans are starting to really rethink their religious practices. Kenyans are starting to really wonder, what is a cult? Am I in a cult? You know, there's all this banter on Twitter on, you know, the Prophet Wars and the mom and dad churches in Nairobi. So I see a level of critical thinking coming up, and people starting to look at religion more objectively, because as a millennial, we grew up being told that anything to do with God, church is good. We never thought that the same, you know, institution we've been told is good can turn into this vile thing we've seen. So I just think there's a reawakening about church, about religion, and I also want to see how the administration will respond. Because remember, this is an administration that came through the church. Okay, they won largely because of their church following. So how are they going to handle this very sensitive topic? So that's my sentiment. Thank you.
President William Ruto labeled, as I mentioned earlier, Paul Mackenzie a terrorist, you know, seeking to isolate him, single him out and say this is not representative of the wider church community. It's the same thing with the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. They said this is a criminal. Let's deal with him as a criminal. The same way Muslim faithful say you cannot condemn the entire faith. I mean, these are individuals who have made individual choices. But before we get into the issue of regulation, right? Do we need tighter regulation? Florence, good morning. Good to see you this morning.
Away, so.
Yes, I'm so right. Like I said, perfect. It was perfect timing. Do you agree, or do you share the same sentiments as the Taifa Leo? Shakahola, serikali yazinduka usingizini.
That's correct. I share what Taifa Leo has said, because as my colleague has said here, Aisha Jumwa mentioned, Honorable Aisha Jumwa mentioned this, you know, sent an alarm. She's a leader. She sent an alarm in 2018. There's something going on here. And so one of the things I was writing here is that, you know, a chief and an assistant chief, they always know who has died, who is sick, who is being buried. Where was the chief? Where was the local administration? Where is the accountability of this man who is supposedly a religious leader for the last, you know, many years? I saw a clip yesterday saying that he closed the church in 2019 and therefore he cannot be held responsible. But I'm just thinking that somebody needs to be able to, and I know you said we don't talk about regulation, but there needs to be an accountability mechanism. It doesn't matter whether you're Dini Msambwa or whatever it is that you operate in as a religious outfit. There's somebody who should be held responsible when something goes wrong within your outfit. And I've always said this even around gender-based violence, that when there's a violation in the church or in a mosque, who is held responsible? Are those people just prayed for and then things end? Is that pastor exonerated and forgiven and then he's not held accountable by the law? And so this gentleman who the president has called, why did I call him gentleman? This guy who the president has called a terrorist, yes, definitely needs to face the law. But I'm wondering, the lawyer here, if you can tell us, where will they get the evidence? You know, so the bodies are there, and I'm hoping that we can get post-mortem, because some of these cults, you'll find it's organ harvesting. I saw that in a particular cult in Nigeria, and so these people might not even have starved to death. So let's wait for the post-mortems to see exactly what happened, because 73 bodies, that's a massacre. And that is should not be acceptable. The other thing I want to take an exception is with religious leaders. And you said our sister here is a religious leader. How come we don't also, us as religious leaders, sound an alarm early enough? Are we afraid to call out each other to say, excuse me, I don't think this is right? Calling out about, because these souls will be lost because somebody kept quiet. And therefore, I'm challenging the religious leaders. Why did you keep quiet for so long when lives are being lost? Lastly, most of these people were adults dragging in their children to this particular cult. So the children in this case had no other way. My son will follow, I mean, up to a certain age, will follow what I tell them. And therefore, adults were responsible for taking their children to that place, and the children died. Because when I saw bodies of children, women, it really broke my heart that somebody turned a blind eye and local administration pretended not to see what was going on. So I'm looking forward to see, the postmortem, and I'm looking forward to see, as we head into discussion of regulation, who will be held accountable for these other outfits that come up every other day. Yeah.
All right, Reverend Lois, I'm curious, especially now I'll get us into the issue of regulation. We do need to take a break though, so why don't we take a break and then we come back with that question of regulation, because when Ida Odinga raised it, although the season in which she raised it was a politically polarizing season, so the backlash was swift, you know, to the point where she had to retract those comments. But is it time to revisit this question, this issue? We come back on the other side of this break with this conversation.
Making a difference.
We did not have water. Hatukuwa able to sterilize equipment. Many students didn't get the chance to interact with the computers.
It takes a single idea, a single decision to do better, to be better. But what does it take to make a change? At Safaricom Foundation, we believe it takes passion, love, dedication, and Kenyans to build a better future. We partner with communities across all 47 counties by advancing education, by enhancing healthcare, by supporting economic opportunities. We partner with people through the values we share, the people who inspire us, and the lives we continue to touch. Because when we unite, there's nothing we can't do.
Hakuna feeling kama coming home to your family na DSTV Compact. Hapa unaweza feel the warmth na connection ya family time. Na feel happiness with laughter and learning. Na feel passion with juicy novellas. Na feel adrenaline with the greatest sporting action. Na feel proud with epic Kenyan stories. Na feel entertained with the latest and the greatest. Nothing beats that feeling. Na feel home with DSTV Compact.
Join me, Brent Leo Smith, and my expert team of guides and cameramen as we explore the wonderful wilderness of Africa. These expert guides and cameramen strive to bring the wildness and magic of Africa into your living room. Come join me for Safari on Pridelands.
Calm down, guys. There's no need for any of this violence. I have a key, please. Just go look.
Angathe watakulalisha ndo wale mafala utusanyaga ma system huku. Anza imagine sonko atusetia bit. Manzi hata nilikuwa na kamtu hasidi tu saa hii. Plans zimechange. First floor. Ulizia chali anaitwa Mike.
Hii ni ngori msi. Buda manze, pesa imeshokia handi bana. Lakini usijaliwe ni achie sawa.
flavor, fruity freshness in every sip.
In your paper this week, blow of 1 week clashes in Khartoum. As Sudanese count losses, the region is already feeling the heat. Businesses are halting as refugee crisis builds up. What is Kagame's role in West Africa's troubled states? Plus our opinion leaders. If artificial intelligence takes over the world, what will Africa do? Are we ready for it? Or is it ready for us? LC Eakuze. If you are looking for a windfall, invest in Uganda's death sector. Joachim Buembo. Magazine. From Uganda to the global stage, Ghetto Kids Got Talent. For these and more stories, get your copy of the East African.
You're going to take your oxtail and then you're going to brown it.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back to AM Live, and as you would expect, we're looking into the Shakahola Horrors. A question was asked of Lois before we went on the break by Florence, and she asked religious leaders themselves, why don't you sound the alarm? Why don't you hold each other accountable, check each other? Because, you know, when we think about terrorism, many times we think Al-Shabaab. So that question I'll leave for Dr. Mary Goretti, the question of this label of terrorist and radicalization and how we have been socialized, because that's a word she used, socialization, to associate it with certain groups and not others. But on the question of regulation and also self-regulation.
And calling out.
Yes.
I think just like I had said, faith and belief systems are very unique and sometimes interesting to sort out. And then a lot of mental illnesses, I said, find a safe place in faith, belief, and spirituality. And so by the time these issues get out of the norm, the person may be 3 or 4 years into this kind of indoctrination. And then one of the most challenging things, because I've sat in one of the interfaith forums, and already there's a clear divide in the religious and particularly the Christian faith with all its dynamics about mainstream, Pentecostal, and I don't know which costals again. So that when you're doing you're practicing your faith in a regular, like we call the mainstream churches, people who have a system on how they practice their faith, then they are called as people who are not as superior as those who can be able to do quite a bit of dynamics, and let me call them with respect, you know, a bit of gymnastics, and you know, there's a bit of what we call a lot of outward signs to it. And so that when, as a psychologist, sometimes I watch the way somebody is practicing their faith, I can tell that something is not okay. Because when you're beating a drum to a point that you're cycling, and you're jumping up and doing quite a number of things that looks more or less like gymnastics, then something might be a little bit of a mess. But if I call out that kind of issue, even right now, as I've said that, someone will raise a protest and begin to say that you have dishonored and disrespected their faith. So that's where the challenge is. And like you rightly said and put it through, when one person, when Ida Odinga called out this, no matter what time it was still right, but it was used so much against her that she had to retract. And then people who saw that celebrated that she has retracted. So a lot of churches who have called out, even at personal levels, have been called people who are dishonoring the other practicing religions. But I again reiterate that a lot of mental illnesses and things that can end up with this kind of massacre have found their safe haven. One, we have two major institutions, and I think Dr. will agree with that, that the institution that shapes behavior and shapes belief system is, there are three: the family. And the family, if it fails, we have the religious institutions, and the religious institutions also have the learning institutions. Yeah.
Okay. On the question of socialization, which you raised earlier, Daktari. So two questions, but let me start with this one. On the issue of people say that a lot of the persons who are susceptible to this sort of indoctrination were women. Yesterday in the newsroom, two gentlemen were like, in some houses, ata kuna sahani wezi tumia, kuna kikombe wezi tumia juu ni ya pasta. Na pasta amesema. Like, so is it, what do you make of those who think that way, that women are somehow more malleable, more gullible, let me put it that way, to this sort of indoctrination?
I would say that women have challenges. First of all, they get displaced when they get married. That is displacement. You leave your people, you come to a new setup where you take most of your time to be accepted, even socially. And who unto you if you don't have the economic muscle? You don't have a voice, and therefore you take up anything which can come to you. So religion comes in very handy to soothe the nerves and to make her believe that she belongs, because the pastor will accept her the way she is, even if it means misusing her, like now setting aside a plate for the pastor, this for the pastor, but it gives her some satisfaction that she's accepted, there's somebody there who believes that she belongs. So women are displaced upon getting married, and therefore they struggle to belong. And it depends on where they are. Even people who are learned and who are women still suffer in the hands of pastors, in the hands of religious people, because of trying to belong, to be there. So anything coming, they would go for it. For example, if a child is sick, in most cases it is your responsibility as a woman to ensure that the child is well. So you'll struggle to go to all places to have this child treated or get better. If a child is having disability, it is your responsibility as a woman to ensure that it is there, or it is not there, or you cover it from the society. So all these things make women very vulnerable and make women take into so much. And when there's somebody who promises good things, like in the name of religion or in religion, that God accepts you the way you are, you will find many women will go to church, many women will go to such places because they find solace and they meet themselves people who want them, people who accept them, they get responsibility and all that, and that is what makes them be what they are. So it's not just, so what we need to do is to empower women socially and economically so that they are not vulnerable to all this. So if my child is sick, I can take that child to the hospital, wherever. If my child requires this, because it all revolves around that reproductive issues. So those are the things. If you don't sire as a woman, or they don't see you giving birth, again, this your own problem and all that. So if you find somebody who promises that if he prays for you, you will give birth, you go there. Even if you are not the one barren, you'll run there and seek that, and many things. Even the issue of domestic violence, women suffer. If somebody promises that you are good, your body should be revered, is the body of Christ and all that, and makes you believe that you are Christ-like, you'll run there, as opposed to somebody who batters you, who does not appreciate you. So that is, to me, what makes women fall prey in the hands of these people, and whatever they have now, they have to give them in exchange of good things. Yesterday I was in a symposium where the finding was that many women from informal settlements would want to escape poverty by marrying men with means, living in Lavington, in Kilimani, and what have you. So if you have that kind of mentality, that is the way to escape poverty, that tells you that if a preacher comes and tells you that come to me and you'll not be poor, definitely you will go there. So that is how low the women have sunk in society, and because of that we are subject to abuse. And we need to empower men, as I said earlier, economically and socially, to affirm them that they are human beings. They can do it, they can shape the world, they can change everything, so that when these people come, they know that they are firm. Yes.
Okay, and before I forget, because there's something she talked about, socioeconomics. And there's a story that got a lot of traction around this whole Shakahola Horror. And that is, and this was published by The Standard, air hostess quit job, sold land for 7 million shillings and joined Mackenzie's church. And for a lot of people, this stood out for them, because they're like, she had a good job, she had land. Because I'm just listening to the conversation, and some of what makes women, as has been explained aptly by Daktari, fall prey to such preachers is socioeconomics, for example, promise of a better life. Lois, you talked about they're looking for alternatives, a better alternative to the situations in which they are now. But when you read stories such as this, and I can see it has been, let me see if I can move it, okay, it has zoom out a little bit so that you can see it clearer. What does this say to you? Because also remember there was a story of a Prophet Award and the advocate who signed over property worth millions, an apartment on Raptor Road, to the church. When you read such stories as this, what is behind it?
I think clearly, thank you, clearly, you know, when we look at the outside and our definition of wellness, you are air hostess, you have a job, you can go to work daily, but the outside manifestation of that illness, I mean, of that wellness, might just be that wellness on the outside. But remember, there is the mental capability and capacity that someone could be in that high and well-paying and they look okay, but inside there could be an illness. And we have various illnesses that make somebody be vulnerable to certain things that they are looking for some sort of help, which is not being offered by their job, it's not being offered by their family. And then we still have a big challenge in noting or getting to know who might be having maybe a psychological or a psychiatric illness. And therefore, when they find that someone else is giving them an alternative for that inner conflict and inner struggle, then they basically would go there, because the trauma that someone goes through when they do not understand their illnesses is so huge, because it's something within them 24/7. And I think it was alluded to. So rather than just look at the perception of wellness is I have a job, I have money, and this kind of job is better, it is good, it should give you all the satisfaction, is where we go wrong. And we have a number of families, and we deal with them on a weekly basis, that someone's child is working or son is working, but he's abusing the wife to a point of taking away her salary and giving her just little money, or even dictating what they put on, what they shop for, and even what they eat. And we take it lightly and don't realize that that can actually be catastrophic even for that particular person. So our perception of wellness is where we all get it wrong.
Okay, yeah. And I'm just going through the Constitution. I'm trying to find the article on the right to
freedom of religion.
Freedom to, what is it called?
Association.
Religious? Is it under association?
No, it's. I think it's religious freedom of worship.
Freedom of worship. Yeah. Okay, so I'll get to this. I'm still trying to find it. I'm not an advocate, but we have an advocate in the building. She will assist me. But before I look at that, Daktari, before I move on from this lady, this is somebody who I would imagine, for her to be an air hostess, she's educated. I would imagine she's exposed, right? Because you interact with many different people, you visit different places. So how does she get indoctrinated? Yeah. Because she's educated, she's exposed.
Who is a woman in the African context? Well behaved, very obedient, and there she was with a good job. But do we know what she was undergoing in that job of hers? And an accomplished woman in Africa is that one who is married, and married again with children, and not just children, boy and girl. Mm-hmm. So this lady, did she have a relationship? What kind of relationship was she in? Maybe when you've made such kind of money again, men shy away from you. You are left hanging. You made all that, but nobody comes to your side. And the society now does not respect you because you are not accomplished according to them. So this makes such kind of people be vulnerable. And if she did not sell her land, she would have even gotten, or even committed suicide, because she doesn't belong. All her age mates maybe have gotten somewhere. Even the ones who do not have gotten somewhere. And yet, her with all that, she doesn't. So if somebody comes promising these things and all that, she'll go. Maybe she was told, come, I will pray for you to have a husband. And you have seen very many religious organizations, pastors, forcing women that they touch your breast, you get healed, or you get a spouse. There's some years back, there was a preacher who came to Nyayo Stadium for women to go there, be prayed for, and get husbands.
I recall.
Yes, and very many women went there. So these are the women now, if you don't meet what the society feels that is what should be, then you are vulnerable to all these people who come along your way. And it's again the society. How are people socialized? How is the family looking at you? The community where you come from, your classmates, your schoolmates, your workmates. So this is somebody who has been sick, as Lois says, and when she gets a vent, and the event is that easier. You know, religion soothes the mind, is the opium of the mind. And therefore, you just take it hoping that you've gotten it and all shall be well.
Okay, and just because I want to move on from this, does this qualify as radicalization, what we've seen in Shakahola, because the president labels, again, Paul Mackenzie a terrorist, called what happened there radicalization.
Yeah, when somebody changes your line of thinking and pushes you to do out of the ordinary, because you cannot link starving to going and seeing God. Because the same, if you are following the Bible, tells us that you should not go before you are 70. So somebody starves you and you're going at 5, it means you're not going to meet your maker. So that is radicalization. Yeah, just like somebody again tells you that if you kill an unbeliever, 72 virgins are waiting for you. I asked somebody that I'm a woman, I want to join you. Am I going to have 72 men waiting for me who are virgins in heaven? They could not answer that. So you can see how attractive they make things easy for you to make you do what is outside the reality, killing somebody who is an unbeliever. So it's the same thing with what that man is saying. Fast and you'll go to heaven and see God. Himself should have died first, gone to heaven, and come back to tell us, this is what I saw. So this is what should be done. But nobody questioned it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is radicalization.
Okay.
Yeah.
And only my other concern is what causes the vulnerability of this person to be radicalized. And I think that's what we had alluded to. There must be something that is causing this person to be vulnerable. And if we could look at that vulnerability, like we are talking about that lady of a air hostess, then we will begin to sort out the issues that cause people to be vulnerable for radicalization.
Okay.
All
right. Sorry?
We are forgetting Yesu of Tongaren. Because until maybe we want as a nation, until people start dying is when we take notice. But we shouldn't wait for people to die. And the only reason there's attention to what happened is because, oh my goodness, people died. But imagine if people had not died.
Yeah.
There will not be an outrage. The president would not have said he's a terrorist. And therefore, as society, we have failed our people. Yeah. We have failed because we're not putting in checks and balances, even in the religious institutions, in terms of, and I know people will say, oh, there's freedom of worship, but there's freedom of worship, but within certain parameters, and not when you're making people lose their lives. And so that's where, for me, we draw the line, like people are dying or people are going to die. Therefore, what are we going to do to ensure that nobody loses a life in the name of religion?
Okay, and speaking of regulation, because now I want to bring that conversation, just put a pin in it so that we can look at the topic of the day, which is this weaponization of acts of intimacy online, and what again it says of us as a society. But Angela, guide me, please. It's freedom of?
It's freedom of conscience, religion, or belief. That is Article 32.
Article 32. So I bypassed it here. Somewhere. Here. Freedom of conscience, religion, belief, and opinion. Every person has the right to freedom of conscience, religion, thought, belief, and opinion. Every person has the right, either individually or in community with others, in public or in private, to manifest any religion or belief, worship, practice, teaching, or observance, including observance of the day of worship. A person may not be denied access to any institution, employment, or facility, or the enjoyment of any right because of the person's belief or religion. A person shall not be compelled to act or engage in any act that is contrary to the person's belief or religion. By seeking to regulate, to like what Professor Kithure Kindiki was talking about, right? And let me just pull up his statement. But as I do so, when we're talking about regulating churches, does that not fly in the face of that constitutionally enshrined right? I have a right to believe what I believe, whether you agree with it or not.
Just go to Article 24 as well.
Article 24?
Because Article 24 talks about limitation of rights.
Let us see Article 24. for limitation of rights and fundamental freedoms, okay?
Yes, so a right or a fundamental freedom can be limited given in the conditions that are laid out from subarticle A to E. And so you will see that the factors that will be considered include the nature of the right, the importance of the purpose of the limitation, the nature and extent of the limitation, and the need to ensure the enjoyment of rights and fundamental freedoms by any individual does not prejudice the rights and fundamental freedom of others, and in relation to the limitation, its purpose and whether there are less restrictive means to achieve the purpose. So should Kenya decide that we're going to regulate churches? Of course, we know that Article 32 says you have a right to believe in whatever it is, or also not to believe. It's freedom of conscience. The state will be guided by these parameters. So they'll be looking at what is the reason for limitation. In this case, we don't want people to be radicalized. We don't want churches to take advantage of the vulnerable. I want to believe that that is a very, it's as justified. It justifies the decision to limit. So of course, the state will also have to look for less restrictive means. So they'll have to work with the church leaders and the religious leaders to find a middle ground that does not distinguish the right to freedom altogether, but at the same time, we have reasonable guidelines or parameters on how to go about it. So even as you read the rights, just have in mind that they can be limited.
Okay, and last word, Florence, on this subject, and I'm still trying to find that statement. Okay, maybe it's not, wasn't posted on Twitter. I'll pull it up on my WhatsApp, but just have the last word on this one. I know you talked about the, what is of particular concern for you is, you are talking about, you give the example of your son, and you said up until a certain age, he will follow you, your lead on what you do, and the socialization that Dr. here was talking about. But as an adult, if I choose that I believe, or rather if my core belief is that if I starve and I die, I will go to heaven. As long as if I'm the one starving, I'm not forcing anybody else to starve. I'm not killing anybody else for the purposes of virgins. Is that something the government can regulate?
I'm looking at...
because it doesn't infringe on anybody else's rights, and it's my belief.
I'm just drawing on, it's interesting because I had an assignment to look at cults before this this story came up, and I was actually studying the Yesu of Tongaren, and I was looking at other cults that have been there. And one of the things you notice with a cult, it starts out as an innocent religious movement, but along the way, the man almost becomes God, or even makes the people believe that he's the only way that you can get to God, or God speaks to him and nobody else. And so by the time you're groomed into believing what he's saying, you forfeit everything. In fact, people forfeit their power and release it to this person who is now their head. And so from that particular point is when Dr. Arias is saying, there is a mental illness going on because you've been conditioned over time to think a certain way. And if you do that, and that's why we look at, when you look at violence, gender-based violence, there is the emotional, there is the psychological, there is the emotional one, which is worse because you can't see the physical, you can't see the physical bruises that a physical violence would cause. And so for me, this is emotional violence. And since it is something that is going on, I think this is something that as a nation, we should make sure that every human being, the WHO description of health, the right to health, includes also mental well-being. And therefore, if that is going to be the case, then so be it. But any regulation will definitely come in place with the players being involved in building up and saying, okay, we can agree to this, we can cede this, we can agree to this. But we cannot continue this way. Because for me, that was violation going on. Yes.
And also misinterpretation of the Bible.
Yes.
All the teachings where you take your children against their wish just because you are a mother or because you are a father to go and fast with you to death. There was also another religion where people were sacrificing their children to God or if their children died, they say they have given sadaka to God. So that also misinterpretation of the Bible, because Isaac was told to go and sacrifice, but it was Abraham, yes, to go and sacrifice Isaac. But in the end, God put an end to human sacrifice. But you can still see some people that they do that to their followers. And that is why we are saying that for somebody to stand in front of people, he must have some level of knowledge to interpret all these things. Even in our African religion, you could not just be a priest or an elder. You must have had some standards to be allowed to offer sacrifices, to offer prayers and all that. So when you just allow any other person in Kenya to speak religion, to speak that, we are doing a disservice to the nation. We should regularize who is this person. And that is why for some time, sorry to say, that some church was being accused of not opening the Bible or allowing people to open the Bible. This was because in the past people had misused what is there in the Bible and made people suffer the same. So that is why they allowed only a few people who have gone through religious studies, theology and philosophy and all that, now to interpret to the followers what it means. But if any other person can make it that he can stand up and do all these other things, then we are bringing confusion to the society. So we need everything which affects the lives of people needs to be regularized, whatever the cost it may be. Let us not just allow any other Tom, Dick and Harry to come on the pulpit and then tell us the way to go to God. If you want to stop this, because like she's saying, there are very many cults. That is just one of them. And even in this Malindi, we are being told that this man has sold his TV station to a fellow preacher, whom I'm told also is having people die, but him is lucky, he's taking them to the mortuary, whereas this person was far away from the mortuary, 100 kilometers away. So there is more which we are going to see if we don't put our foot down as a nation and say this is what should be done and this is what should not be done. Otherwise, we are going to lose our people, because as it is now, many of us are vulnerable because of the economic status of the country. And anybody promising you anything, you will go there to make it. And like yesterday, Dr. Mutua was saying that if somebody who was a failure is been seen to be making it in religion, that is where people will go. People will stop being doctors, people will stop being teachers, people will stop being engineers. Everybody will be a pastor, because when you are a pastor, you get followers, you are heard, you are a celebrity, you even have good cars, good houses and all that, at the expense of the people who are you are supposed to change their lives positively. So we need to regulate the way you do things before things are late in the day.
What I'm hearing is vulnerability and also competence.
Yeah. Only if there's something very critical, I'll be quick about it. One, like it has been said, quite a number, some of these people who are leading cultic kind of movement are highly educated and extremely professionals. And so they know how to manipulate. So some of them need skills. Like, you never get a foolish conman. Conmen are very smart. They know what to do. And that then calls for, the regulations. There is also a success. There's part of success, and we need to be aware that right now, previously anybody could marry anybody on the street as long as they call themselves a pastor. But the government has succeeded in licensing people who have been fronted and have certification to be the only one who can marry And before they marry those people, they have taken them through some processes. So there can be some level of success, but depending, because there are so much dynamics in faith, it will just depend on what parameters can we begin to regulate, then we close certain doors. Because how maybe certain dynamics you cannot really even regulate. But there are certain places, if they begin to be regulated, then they can close certain doors and then begin to bring sanity into the practice of faith.
All right.
The church should enrich us, not to enrich the church.
All right, so I will put a pin in this conversation there. But I did find that statement by Kithure Kindiki on his Twitter handle. The unfolding Shakahola Forest massacre is the clearest abuse of constitutionally enshrined human rights to freedom of worship, prima facie large-scale crimes under Kenyan law, as well as international law, have been committed. While the state remains respectful of religious freedom, this horrendous blight on our conscience must lead not only to the most severe punishment of the perpetrators of the atrocity on so many innocent souls, but tighter regulation, including self-regulation of every church, mosque, temple or synagogue going forward. While the multi-agency security team on site is doing their best to unearth the truth, literally and figuratively, and prevent further loss of lives, I have directed the Regional Commissioner for Coast Region together with the regional security team to reinforce the team in Malindi ahead of his visit today. Enough security officers have been deployed and the entire 800-acre forest is sealed off and declared a scene of crime. All right, I'll move us along. Although I feel like we might need to set another day for this conversation to do it justice, and that is indecent exposure, weaponization of acts of intimacy online. Millicent Omanga was trending for several days. Last week, was it?
Yes.
And this is after a video allegedly, a video allegedly, you know, because you know nowadays we have what are called deep fakes. Allegedly of her was shared with the purpose, whether it was an attempt to embarrass her, blackmail, extort, I don't know the motivation. It's not the first time. If I'm to stick to high-profile individuals, even outside, not just women, even with men, the images that were shared of John Lonyangapo that landed some time on my WhatsApp, I'm not sure they were actual images, as I said, allegedly. Same thing happened with the person of Muhisa Kitui when he came back to Kenya after leaving UNCTAD. Back to women, there was a case that was prosecuted over the Fatma Dulo case, and then outside of that, even before that, there were images which were bandied about allegedly of Rachel Shebesh, Mike Sonko, you know, and even outside politics, because in Kenya, you know, those tend to be the high-profile individuals. DJ Cream de la Cream, those are videos which circulated allegedly of his person. What do you make of that sort of? Is it a cultural issue? What does it say to you, Florence?
I have very strong sentiments around this, and especially when it comes to women. I did a book in the beginning of the year just talking to women parliamentarians or women who vied in the last election from across the board. It didn't matter which political outfit they came from. And one of the threads that ran across, whether they won or lost, was one of the tools that was used against women who wanted to run for leadership was exposing you sexually. You will agree with me that when a man is exposed sexually to having multiple partners, in fact, the community lauds him like Yeni Simba, you know, he's the man, because he's able to, how do you manage those many women, right? But when a woman is exposed to have either multiple partners or her nakedness is shown, then women, we will tend to shy off from public office because we are afraid, because society has socialized us to be a certain way, nice, proper, quote unquote, wearing long dresses, sometimes don't even put makeup, don't overdo yourself. I mean, all those things have been used so that women are intimidated to be in a public position. So this is a weapon that has been used by many women, and I want to just quote something that I put in the book. Women lawmakers had reported more online abuse ahead of the vote in August 2022. The abuse was in the form of sexism, misogyny, humiliating or sexualized imagery, and a lot of it was online. I remember one, Fatma Hamza, I think, she was Hamisa Zaja, sorry. She was running for women representative in Mombasa. And she woke up one day, I woke up one fine morning only to find my social media account, Facebook, hacked and loaded with insult and pornographic content. So a lot of her face and a body, which is not hers, but almost looks like hers, was online. What does that mean? It tells the electorate this is quote unquote, allow me to use this word, a slutty woman, and therefore she should not be a leader. So all of these are always used to intimidate women. Because now, if any of us wants to run for office, you are imagining what will happen if they expose my nakedness online for whatever reason. Before I run to say it is not me, you see, the world already believes it is me. And those are images that my children will find along the way. So this is a form of abuse that women endure that would deter new entrants into the political scene. As it is, we have fewer women than men in parliament, and hence the need to make the environment conducive for women, new women rather, to come into the political space. We are still struggling with the 2/3 gender rule. We are still struggling to ensure that we have women at all levels, and especially political. But you will find such attacks go against women who are in political or public leadership. Yeah. So for me, that is violence. And I know in the upcoming UNGA meeting, the UN General Assembly, one of the conversation is around digital violence against women. And so it is recognized worldwide as a big deal. And therefore, we should not take it lightly as women.
Okay. Yeah. And so I need to take a break, but when we come back, does this qualify as gender-based violence? Yes. Despite it happening in a different space. Yes. So we come back with that. And before we take the break, I was trending last week on Thursday.
Yes.
And so I was like, I like when your video has surfaced. We come back on the other side of this break.
All transactions with DTB are secure. Achieving more for you is the least we can do. Because at Diamond Trust Bank, you don't just bank with us, you bank on us.
It's the headquarters of good vibes. So I should just kneel and begin to call on Jesus because I'm a bishop.
You know, Dr. Kingori, yes, you sound like a street fighter. Where did you grab it? Unataka noma.
Kingori, let me tell you something. Mimi mtu angenipata saa hiyo nikiwa first year, angeangukia bibi mzuri.
You know, they always say smart women, where to catch them is with love.
Kingori, I love how your suit looks. I love you in a suit. I love you in a t-shirt.
As in any example, ama you actually mean that?
Maifungua akili ya msee ama kichwa ya msee ukapata vile watu husema huyu jamaa ana akili.
Tunaweza toa nyama kwa huko nyuma tuweke kwa
kifua. Yesi mtu anakuwa na roho chafu sana. Na ukidive inahesabiwa?
Yes, ndio ukiwin, udive win si umewin.
Hiyo ndio tizi unafaa upige. Napiganga tu tizi ya 90 meters ya kwanza, alafu nikifika 90 meters na fly. Every Friday on NTV 7:30 p.m.
Mimi nilikuwa tu pale reserve. Nime-maintain, kuna fresh air, nini, na bros between peace. Alafu, imagine shemeji yangu, akakuja ametoka Nairobi, ati yeye ameomoka. Akaniambia, ati Nairobi iko vitu soft, vitu mzuri. For example, tukifika Nairobi, atanipeleka place inaitwa Village Market, tukakulia huko. Si tukapanga safari, sisi ndio tumewasili wapi? Nairobi. Guess what? Huyu mtu patala ya kunipeleka Village Market, akanirutisha Village, akanipeleka Market.
To get Market Village, dial *812*799#. Skiza na Nation.
better have my money.
Good morning, rise and shine. Thank you for being with us dark and early on the Morning Fix. My name is David Ayuke.
And I am Mariam Bashar. This is where good music lives, and guaranteed your weekday mornings are never going to be the same again.
Wake up to the sound of David and Mariam on Nation FM.
Every single day, every single day.
They're your morning hosts with the most, bringing you the energy you need to start your day. Nation FM, where good music lives.
Let me see y'all.
Dance.
We partner with communities across all 47 counties by advancing education, by enhancing healthcare, by supporting economic opportunities. Because when we unite, there's nothing we can't do.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. We're on the question of indecent exposure. This morning I have with me Florence Machio in studio, Angela, as well as Dr. Mary Goretti and Lois Snow. And I'll come now, in case you haven't met them here, there. I'll come now to Angela. The right to privacy, right, is enshrined in the Constitution. And it states as such, every person has a right to privacy, which includes the right not to have information relating to their family or private affairs unnecessarily required or revealed. What recourse does somebody who finds themselves in a situation similar to the one that we've just been told about by Florence, such as Hamza Zaja found herself in, you know, with Photoshop and all of this, what recourse does she have legally?
So after we had our constitution in 2010, we passed the Data Protection Act in 2019, I believe. And so what this means is that we have an act that lays down the bodies where you can complain for data breaches. They explain the rights and duties of people who take your data and all that. So already that is sorted in our legislation. However, KICTANET, so I work in an ICT policy think tank and I lead their Women Digital Rights program. So we did a study, a research on data protection laws from a gender perspective, trying to understand, is the law biased? Is the law clear? Are there any unintended impacts of the law? And so you will find that the Act lays down data that is not governed by the Act, you know, exemptions. And one of the exemptions is data shared in household or private life. We found that to be problematic. I don't know if you know the history of feminism, but even just getting to a point where we acknowledge that women can be abused in the home or in the family was a big struggle. The sociologists will tell you, because people kept saying, this is private life and this is public life. So when you find a distinction similar to that in a law promulgated in 2019, it really makes you start to wonder, does our laws have blind spots? But I wouldn't say that all is lost, because revealing of intimate pictures is still penalized under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. And this is legislation that people are using for cyber-related violence, like sharing of intimate images. Another recourse that people need to start considering is that these social media platforms are big tech companies. They might not have offices in Nairobi, but you can report. You know, you'll always see 3 dots on a post. Any social media platform, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, even WhatsApp has the 3 dots, and you can say, I'm reporting this content for all this, and they'll take you through their complaints handling mechanism. So beyond the national jurisdiction, there is also new global solutions to online gender-based violence, because these platforms are not being controlled by our governments. These platforms are being controlled by companies. So you need to find a way of talking and lodging these complaints with these companies. Of course, there are problems with trying to go against a big company like Facebook, like Google and all, but those are the avenues that we have now. Another issue that has been raised about how to follow up or get remedies when you're having online gender-based violence attacks online is that there's so much burden that is put on the victim and very less emphasis on punishing the perpetrator. So, and I see this even in how we do projects when we come to digital rights for women. So we're telling women, you need to have cybersecurity skills, you need to know how to report, you also need to see a psychologist in case of mental health or mental health challenges. What are we doing about the perpetrators? What are we doing about the laws that we have for punishing perpetrators or tracing perpetrators now that it is online and you need to find them offline? So these are the new conversations that are coming up on online gender-based violence, and I think we should not ignore them. I think we need to start thinking of a more harmonious legislation on online gender-based related violence. I say this because we have the Criminal Code, we have the Sexual Offences Act, we have you know, all these and other countries like the UK are now discussing online safety bill. They are trying to harmonize everything to do with the online environment in one piece of legislation. So I think that's where the conversation is going, and these pieces of legislation must lay out how do I go against the big tech, how or which channels should we have. I'm thinking of how we have very robust gender desks at police stations. Should we start having these gender desks being equipped to understand online gender-based violence as well? Because largely our lives are online. Before, we never thought that a picture of yours leaking on the internet could be as damaging. We thought gender-based violence is being beaten, you know, we thought about it in a very physical way, but it is not physical. It is both physical and virtual. And sometimes you find that what happens online spills over to the offline. You've talked about the right to privacy. What happens when someone shares your home address on the internet? Everyone now knows where you live, right? That is a security risk. So we need to stop thinking about the online environment as less harmful, as something you can just switch off the internet and go. You know, we have gone beyond that. There's so much that someone can do to you online. And just to finish, Kicternet and GIZ, I don't know if you know the German corporation, they supported us to come up with an e-learning module on online gender-based violence. And I really encourage people to just go online and search the Digital Inquiry Kit on online gender-based violence. So there are 6 lessons. You get to understand what is gender, what are these social constructs, and then linking it to what we see online. Because we realized online gender-based violence really just stems from societal biases and constructs of what it means to be a man or a woman. So if people think women should be cooking in the physical world, when they see you online being vocal about Azimio and, you know, whichever political party, they'll tell you go and cook. Go to the kitchen, okay? So these are not attitudes that stem on the online environment. These are attitudes we had offline. So we need to stop thinking that when you come to the online environment, you're meeting new people, and offline you're meeting the same people. So the same biases we have in our physical world, we're going to see it replicated and even made worse online. Another problem is that online, at least I know who is doing this, okay? I mean, offline, I know the person, I have an idea. Online, this could be some new accounts created solely for the purpose of trolling you. Okay? So it's even worse. The reach is worse. The magnitude is worse. So everything just becomes amplified on the online space.
Okay.
And I think, Angela, sorry to...
No problem. Go ahead.
There is the cyber crimes unit. I mean, they are trained, fully trained, so we don't need more training of the gender desk. We have the cyber crimes unit, and I've used them before when I saw somebody post the picture of a child and say, I slept with this one today, and that was a 3-year-old. I screenshot it, I sent it to them, that guy was arrested. So the cyber crimes unit is able to track these guys. And so my question would be, why aren't you tracing these people and therefore bringing them to book? Because they are breaching several laws here. And for me, as a country, if we do not value our women enough to do what we need to do to protect them, and also to just tell them, yes, we see you, we hear you, and we're going to do everything to protect you, like if it would have happened for any other person, and then there's something also wrong with us. So for me, I called out the cyber crimes unit. I remember tagging DCI and asking, what are you doing about this? Why aren't you? And this is a public figure. What are you doing about it? What about me, who is not a public figure? What will happen if something like that happens? And you know you have the machinery to track these people. Yes.
Because they actually do, because I remember even with the DP, there was somebody impersonating him on Facebook.
Yes.
They nabbed the guy, he was arraigned, and he asked for a job. He asked the deputy president, which I found was interesting, for a job. So it is, like you said, it is possible. Yes.
Wait, maybe let me just jump in. We have a problem with how the law is applied. So let me explain. The cyber crimes unit of the DCI is labeled as the anti-child trafficking and anti-human trafficking and child protection unit. So what this means is that their mandate is based solely to protect women, to protect children online.
And I think they focus on
so much
on sex trafficking,
children, but now women who have just been trolled online, the experiences, what they tell us is, you go there and they tell you, Madam, zima simu, go back home. The way they treat women and the way they treat children is different. And this we can even see in our laws. If for child online protection legislation, it is very robust. We have the Child Protection, the Children Act. We have the Sexual Offences Act, which is largely about offences related to minors. But women are not protected as well as children. I understand that we have really understood how to protect children online. Can we take the same learnings from there and transplant it to protecting women? Because what we are telling women is that your pain is not it's not something we care about. We don't honor your pain, we don't honor your experiences online. Just switch off your phone and go. So there is still some work to be done on access to justice for women. For children, it's kind of sorted. They trace, they can follow the URL code and get to where the live stream is happening. If it is child online live stream, all those things they can. But we are not having the same experience with women. Women's cases are not being taken seriously.
Okay.
Even when women say, I'm going to court, you'll find that people online are like, where is she going to court? They don't even understand that there are laws that protects women against this. That's the kind of, there's no awareness about it. So if we raise awareness that there's a Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, if we have more cases of people being punished for cyber-related violence against women, we might see a change in behavior. But up to this point, people think they can get away with it.
One of the proposals that was made, speaking of Millie Odhiambo, she said, my party is woman, and she said if she was an advocate of the death sentence, she would ask that that be applied to those types of instances. But her proposal was a life sentence. But before I ask Florence to weigh in on that, like, does the law need to be amended to assist in the crackdown or to dissuade, to deter such acts, behaviors? Is that something we need to consider? But Dr. Mary Goretti, there's something that Angela said that stuck with me, and she said, and it stuck with me because I was having this conversation with Bernard Ndong yesterday, and he said, is this evidence of moral decay, or is it, as Angela saying, this is just another platform for people to exercise these biases and all these bad behaviors? Is it evidence of moral decay, or is it just a manifestation of what is happening offline?
There is no moral decay in that, because when you abuse somebody,
the exposing and being nude and all that, that is emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And this is happening because the men especially think that digital world belongs to them. Remember, it goes back in history when we had typewriters. Men used to say that it is women with the nimble fingers to use the typewriters. But when the computers came, who are the people using computers today? When you walk around, they have briefcases with computers, computer bags and all that. Women have the least. So that is their space. And they would not want women to go to that space. And therefore, if you go to that space, they will shame you. It's like the clubs we have around the country. There are some clubs where it is men-only club. And even if it is for both, there are certain rooms which only belong to men. So cyber, digital space, technology offer young women and men innovative ways of doing things. And this is what they would not want us to go in there to get it. It's like education. How many people still deny women the opportunity to go to school? Very many societies, because they know education is an enabler. So digital space is also an enabler to development, and you can see how women used it during COVID-19. As from the university, we did a survey on how women use the digital space to mitigate their way out of employment, like the mama mboga and all that. And most of them were saying that they were able to sell the merchandise online and survive. So if that is what made them do and make them empowered, men would not want that. So you are scared to use that platform so that you don't get mileage from what it is. So it is something just come in, and it is for men, and men do not want women to go there. So if you go there, you will meet all this kind of bashing and all that. They'll even ask you, why do you even have an account? Why do you even have this and that? Why are you poking your nose where you don't? So that is a very powerful platform idea, because it connects you to the world. Remember, a woman's space was in the home. It was in the kitchen. But now digital platform, when I post something, the whole world reads and they know about it. So how would they want to keep you away from it? By using your sexuality. And that is what they know hits women most, especially in politics. So now, with economic, you can see Alibaba is making billions, trillions out of online marketing and all that. So if women can learn to do that, and that is what we are doing at the university now, we are incubating women and teaching them on how to use the space to sell their merchandise in the confines of their homes and all that. If we can do that and reach the Alibaba space where he has reached, you know, who would want a woman to be where Alibaba is?
Okay. And it's interesting because this year's theme for the International Women's Day was actually digit all of us. Yes. That there should be no inequality where access to the online space is concerned. But Lois, finally, because I'm being told to go time bad, is this a form of sexual and gender-based violence, regardless of whether it is male or female? Because I will name somebody else who texted me on this issue, and that is Lodrick Mayabi. And he said even men have been victims.
Yeah, true. True. Of course, I agree and really appreciate the sentiments that have been shared. And gender-based means gender, whether it's male or female, anything that really infringes on their rights, whether it's emotional, financial, and we have all these kind of issues now with violence. And some of them are pretty, you know, you cannot put your finger on them until that person begins to talk about what they are going through. Then you realize that's an emotional violence, financial violence, bullying actually, because a lot of that is happening within relationships. But I want to just weigh in and say, you know, we need to come to a point of acknowledging the realities, and realities that are unchangeable. And we might take the entire time until from a spiritual Christ comes back to really argue about some of these realities, because we don't seem to be getting around it, wrapped around it, because every time there are things, dynamics that keep coming up. And so the reality, one, is that women are more vulnerable when it comes to issues of using weapons of sexuality and sexual issues. They tend to get the big bang on it. And so there is need for them to come to the reality that they could need a little bit more muscle, more protection, more safety nets around them when they get into certain spaces. The number two, the reality of the digital space is here. And the fact that I will always be big. In the psychological and psychiatric world, there are over 3,000 mental illnesses. And some of them are really expressed in platforms now like the digital platform. And so when you find somebody with that kind of a mindset, that kind of socialization, that kind of, because they have their traumas, they are processing, then they have targets, and most of their targets, and I think Angela made it clear, the target is usually the vulnerable, more vulnerable, and that will be children and women. And many times when you find, like, look at what happens when a robbery is there, and the first thing, many times you find that women are being, you know, sexually violated. So what makes that person, they wanted to go for money, but on top and overall of it, they are also thinking sexually. So that reality needs to be there, and then we begin to protect ourselves. Then the other one is, and from our point, from a psychologist's point of view, we ask ourselves, are there success stories of people who have managed their safety? Because even if all the laws are put, yes, they will do the person who was a perpetrator, but then what is the state of my mind? When I want to become a public figure and I'm a woman, then what does it mean for me to step up and use every platform? Because we must use it equally. Then number two, if I become a celebrity, what do I need to do differently because I am a woman? What do I need to do differently because I'm young? What do I need to do different because I am aged? You see, you hear one of the politicians keep on defending his age, you know, because it's being used against him. What are you doing here? And so there are a lot of things that we need to come to reality about. And whether we can fight over it, the reality and the protection for me is how strong are you emotionally, mentally, and maybe even add spiritually, because spirituality is not really religion, but where you get your highest supreme court of your safety mentally, that you can be able to sleep despite somebody who is mentally ill doing things against you. Are you still able to sleep? Are you able still to walk without shame? Are you still able to maybe get to explain when you need to the reason why that has happened? So that for me is what is big. Realistically knowing that this space, yes, I have my vulnerabilities, and what safety nets am I putting around me?
All right. So unfortunately, ladies, I have to bring the conversation to a close at this point, but I have promised, and I will plead with you to be gracious enough, please, to come back and get into this, delve into this deeper. But the topic of conversation this morning has been indecent exposure, weaponization of acts of intimacy online. And with me in studio, I have been honored to have Dr. Mary Goretti Akinyi Otieno, Department of Sociology, University of Nairobi. Lois No, she is a psychology specialist, as you've probably figured out for yourself just listening to her. Florence Machio, women's rights campaigner, and like Millie Odhiambo, she says her party is woman. And Angela Minayo, advocate and programs officer, Kictonet. You can visit Kictonet online. I saw you have a comic strip on these issues. I saw you did a study on sexual harassment online. So there's a lot of content that you can find on their website. Just search for Kictonet All right, my name is Olive Burrows. Winnie Lubembe coming up with Your World.
Jik cleans and kills 99.9% of illness-causing germs and COVID-19 in your home. Jik, your family's guardian against germs and COVID-19.
Oya, ni aje wazee watu wangu wa power DJ mwapa hivi kama